What is up, everybody? It's Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got Andy from Black Crown Initiate here. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. The newest album, Violet Portraits of Doomed Escape, which is scheduled to come out August 7th. What I'm curious is, being that it was 4 years since the release of Selves We Cannot Forgive, do you just consider this like a follow-up to that conceptually, or do you think that this is almost like a new start for Black Crown Initiate?
I think it's more of the latter, I guess. In a lot of ways, conceptually, the album's about sort of letting go and figuring out how to be accountable. And I think, in the past, that's not necessarily what I was writing about. But I think, because of the hiatus and because of everything I went through as a person, I moved across the country, started making life choices that were consciously healthier, mentally and physically, mostly mentally. And I think the album's a reflection of that, so it does kind of feel like a new thing.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, being that this is a personal album for you, like, did that help maybe influence the music itself as well as, like, the lyricism in a way?
Well, the music itself was kind of composed the way it always was. I just sit down with a guitar and I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. So it's that side of it isn't very intellectual at all, which I enjoy. I mean, it's just looking for things that sound cool and working within that compositionally and trying to make interesting songs. But I mean, lyrically, that's where things get kind of heady for me, I guess. But the album wasn't really composed any differently, at least musically.
Okay, so people who may have discovered you guys on Selves We Cannot Forgive, that, like, people aren't going to be expecting like something too drastic of a change, right? Just conceptually, it's a little bit different.
I mean, I think everything we've ever done has been at least a little different. I mean, and I think that probably comes from the fact that we don't ever really say that doesn't sound like us. We just, we're very, very open to trying new things and whatever else. So, I mean, if you enjoyed that type of album, I think you'll continue to enjoy what we're doing. At least I hope.
Definitely. Well, you kind of in a way answered like the next question already, because like I've always considered Black Crown Initiate's music to be kind of on the more experimental side. Like, you have elements of like melodic death metal and progressive metal and all that. So trying new things is almost kind of like part of what makes Black Crown Initiate, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's from the beginning. That's been, I wanted to have a band where I could do whatever I wanted, essentially. And I listen to so many different kinds of music, and everybody in the band does. So, I mean, it's just kind of natural for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you ever have a preconceived idea on how you want the album to sound like, or is there kind of like a lot of improvising, or maybe like inspiration just comes out of the blue?
Yeah, I don't really ever have I want the album to sound like this. I've never really gone that way. When I sit down and I play guitar, it's very much just I just play, and certain things happen, and I'm like, and I never record anything either. I just sort of remember stuff and develop songs that way.
You ever worried though you'll have the best guitar pattern written down and you don't have the record button on, and then you forget it? I'd imagine that's happened once or twice, right?
Yeah, it's happened, but I mean, I kind of always just looked at it as if I forget something, maybe it wasn't worth remembering or whatever. But I mean, it could also just be that I'm lazy.
Fair enough. For your guitar work, do you actually have a theoretical element that you follow? Like, do you know what scale you're working off of, or what key, or are you a self-taught artist?
No, I know that stuff, and our other guitar player, Ethan, is very, very into that stuff. I know a lot of it, and I use it when I need to, but it's, like I said, the intellectual aspect of guitar playing doesn't necessarily interest me. Although I have a lot of respect for dudes that are really that really utilize a lot of that. I don't personally, but I do know a lot of theory, and everybody in the band pretty much does.
Yeah, you just don't let it dictate you, right?
Yeah.
Being that your vocalist between Selves We Cannot Forgive and this one, being that James is now also singing for Replicire, did maybe him experiment to go another band bring in some newer elements to this album as well?
I'm sure it did, although that would be more of a question for him as far as that. I know that when we went into the studio, he was very, very prepared, and probably like never before. and he really did well on the album. And I think the fact that he was out touring with Reckless Ire probably helped him keep his chops up. And I know that band's they're a very technical band, and I think playing with them helped him probably more in a live sense, because he was dealing with more complex material than ours. So I think that, if I had to guess how that helped him, I would say that for sure.
Mm-hmm. When you look at the entirety of the Black Crown catalog, from Wreckage of Stars to Cells We Cannot Forgive to this new album, is it almost kind of like a self-portrait or a reflection of who you and James and everybody in the band are at that particular time?
Yeah, I mean, I write all the lyrics and stuff, so I think that it's very much been, I guess you could say, autobiographical, in a way. So yeah, I do. There's a lot of me in those lyrics for sure.
But I'd imagine the album's open to interpretation, right? Or do you try to maybe engage the listener into seeing things from your point of view?
Oh no, totally. It's totally open to interpretation. In fact, I don't really like to discuss what things are about, because I think, my favorite music is stuff that I, sort of identified with and interpreted on my own. And I think that's really important in the process of experiencing an album.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I've noticed is that when, especially with listening to this album, when you go from Son of War to Trauma Bonds to a song like Son of War and Holy Silence, like it's almost fair to say like every song really kind of has like its own like vibe behind it. Like, is it fair to say that there were many different emotions felt through the course of 4 years making this album?
Absolutely. I mean, that album is about the darkest period of my life by far. And, working through it and working to let it go and to grow from it. And, so there's a lot. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of hopelessness in there.
Mm-hmm. Does revisiting this material, because, you write it, but then you have to, like, track it and record it and produce it and all that. Do you almost kind of like to maintain that emotional spark? Do you almost have to kind of, like, put yourself into that same mood as when you were first writing it?
I don't know. I mean, that's a tough question to answer. I think in tracking and all that, I mean, it's pretty much already there. I mean, when you track, particularly vocals, you want to get like a passionate performance, and I think that has to do, with a guy like James, like he's just a monster, and he has, he has very good control over his voice. But I think I sort of divorced myself from a lot of that material, at least emotionally, after it came together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, is it almost fair to say that the making of this album maybe brought closure to that darkness that you were writing about?
Absolutely. The album itself, for me, is a bookmark of my life. A way to end a chapter, for sure. Mm-hmm. So in that regard, it's very positive.
Mm-hmm. Do you almost have to like put yourself in when it comes to like writing this material, because you're going through turmoil, you're going through pain and suffering. Obviously, you want to write about what you're feeling. Do you almost need to be in a certain place at a certain time for the creative energy to flow through? I
don't really know. I think if you're just, I think I'm an overly emotional person, probably to a fault, and I sort of, for lack of a better word, I guess I just stockpile experiences and emotions, and a lot of times they're just there when it comes time to write lyrics or whatever, and sometimes it's not even very clear what you're writing about as you're writing about it, and then later on you're like, oh shit, that's what I was saying. But yeah, I think it just comes from being a sensitive person or something.
Yeah. And with the emotional, because sometimes you're working on a song for days or weeks or months, and I'd imagine the longer you're working on something, maybe the harder it is to sort of maintain that emotional spark, right?
Yeah, for me, I mean, sometimes the composition of the musical aspect of a song is that's the time-consuming part. When it comes time for lyrics and vocals and stuff, that really that stuff just kind of pours out of me. Um, I can, you know, I can write I think I wrote the lyrics to Years in Frigid Light in like 20 minutes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because it's just there.
Are you ever worried that, do you sometimes have lyrics written before the actual music? Are you ever worried that like you'll have the best lyrics ever, but they're always like one or two syllables over the arrangement?
No, I don't really write lyrics until it's time. I don't have like a journal, and I don't like write stuff down ever. It's just sort of when it's time, it's there. And I try not to worry about stuff like that, because that type of worry, I think that a lot of times people end up tripping kind of over their own feet there. It's like, oh, can I do it? Is it there? Is it just to relax? It's there, and it'll be there when it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. As somebody who's seen Black Crown Initiate live numerous times now at this point, the first, I saw you on the tour with Neil Bliviscaris, and I saw you on the
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I saw you on the tour. I think it was like Dying Fetus, The Acacia Strain, Jungle Rot, and you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's always a different experience seeing you live, but do you maybe channel a similar energy into your live presence as you do in your songwriting, or is playing live and songwriting completely separate arts?
No, I mean, playing live is very much, it's an expression of maybe self-destruction, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean, you get to like forget who you are for a little while and have the illusion of complete control, which you never have, but that's sort of as close as you come to it. And I think that's why so many people love playing live. It's just like you get to do whatever you want for a little while, and so it is in a lot of ways pretty similar, because when you're composing music or when you're writing lyrics, like you're not really, you get to forget yourself for a little while.
Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine when you're live, kind of like we said, like anything goes, I'd imagine the studio is a little bit more dictating, right? And a little bit more focused.
Yeah, but that is a different type of fun for me. I really enjoy the studio, because you get to see, I mean, for me, I get to nerd out with like guitar pedals and stuff, and also, I can see the fruition of something that we started, and that's a really fulfilling thing.
Yeah,
being in a band is a very fortunate thing to be allowed to do, and I try not to forget that, especially at this point in my career, because for a while there it looked like maybe that wouldn't happen anymore. And even now, the future's so uncertain, but we're still lucky to get to do it.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like Black Crown Initiate has its guns loaded, because I know a lot of people who are anticipating this album. I know a lot of people who had Selves We Cannot Forgive as their number one album of 2016. But now that you guys signed with Century Media Records, and Century Media has really been running the forefront a lot for aggressive bands. I mean, with signing you guys, Vitriol and Hideous Divinity and Lorna Shore and all that, like it almost seemed like Century Media was the best label to go with too, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, Century Media is a label that, and I talk about this all the time, but it's a label that early on in my life, getting into heavy music and more extreme forms of music gradually and whatnot, Century Media was a label that a huge portion of my music library that I have back at my parents' house in Pennsylvania, a lot of it is Century Media or stuff that I ordered from CM Distro back in the day. So, I mean, like, that label itself is a huge part of my musical DNA. So it's just really cool to be, being able to say you're on that label. That's just cool. Yeah. Plus, they're, like, really passionate about heavy metal, as you said, and they really allow you, like, they signed us, they signed us because they believed in us, I guess, and they continue to allow us to do our thing, which that doesn't always happen with a record label. You have guys come in and go, well, maybe you should try this, maybe you should do this. Century Media doesn't do that. So it's very refreshing.
Yeah. Well, their roster is also like very diverse, I've noticed. Like they have Lacuna Coil and they have like, more radio friendly bands like Stitched Up Heart or New Year's Day or Fozzy, but then now again with like you guys and Aborted and like some of the most aggressive, like they just signed Imperial Triumphant, who's like just straight up.
Yeah, that band's wild, man.
Yeah, they're insane. I find like I was listening to that album and I like, it's absurd to me that human beings actually made this. It's so awesome.
It's weird, yeah.
Yeah, so,
I like it.
So it just seemed like they're open-minded because that's what drives their label, just having many different styles.
Yeah, and it always has. So, I mean, yeah, it's cool to be there. Yeah. I dig it.
Of course.
And they're good. They're good people. The American office and the German office. Everything's cool.
Yeah, huge shout out to the whole staff at Century Media. They've been really good to us
Big time.
as well.
Cool.
But you know, it's funny too. Like it almost seems like you have a vision of what Black Crown Initiate is, right? And not even just with the music, but there's also maybe like a visual aesthetic that surrounds it and everything else, right?
Yep.
Yep. Is there kind of like something you would say, like, is there maybe a universal message? Because even though that Violent Portraits of Doomed Escape is more of a personal record for you, is there maybe like a universal message that could tie in this with your other two albums as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would say at this point it would be personal accountability. You know, you can blame other people. You can cry about what's happening to you. You can, you know, do whatever you want. You can do drugs. You can, you know, engage in all manner of self-destructive behavior. But at the end of the day, nothing changes until you change it.
Yeah.
And you know, I think the album is sort of a reflection of, you know, and I'm far from fucking perfect, but I moved across the country. I made conscious choices to engage in healthier relationships, all around, make healthier life choices, you know, and when you do that, you see that you start to attract more of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that would be at this point the I don't know, if not message, but that's what I take from it.
Yeah. I almost feel like from listening to the albums, and especially with this particular one, like it almost seems like the world is always going to win based on what it wants. It's up to you on how to. It's like it's not the hardships that define you; it's how you confront them that does.
Well, you can't control what happens, but you can control how you react to what happens.
Exactly. I have two more questions for you. You ready for the most difficult one of the whole interview?
Absolutely.
Okay, because you have a song like Invitation that's, you know, under 8 minutes long, but then the final song, He Is the Path, is just 2.5 minutes long. How do you know when a song is done?
Man, I don't think, like, you know, back to the whole thing, that's not something that we necessarily over intellectualize. But I will say that with this album, I think we were very conscious of you learn from your past experience, and there's a couple, I won't say where, because I don't want to take away from other people's listening experiences, but there are a couple points in our past output where I've thought to myself, like, you didn't need to do that again, or something like that, you know, you didn't need to repeat that part, or whatever. And I think this album, we were very conscious in trimming those little fat portions off, and I think it worked. There's nothing on this album that I really would say, you didn't need to do that. But a song is done. I mean, you just know. I don't really know how to answer that. That is a really difficult question, because
that's why it's my favorite one to ask. It stumbles everybody.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, you're just like, it's done.
Yep. I ask every artist this. It stumbles every one of them, and that's why. Even though my viewers are sick of me asking that, I never get tired of asking it.
No, it's a good question for sure.
Thank you. And finally, just the final question, you know, obviously, what does the future hold for Black Crown Initiate? Obviously, you know, thanks to a virus that shall not be named, obviously, live shows aren't happening at the moment. But I'd imagine, you know, when all this is over, and it will eventually be over, we'll be seeing you guys on the road quite a bit, right? Maybe some live stream performances or something like that?
Dude, we'd like to hit the road as soon as possible, you know, as soon as the world is ready and people able to do that in an adequate way. You know, the live stream stuff works. I think for me, it's a matter of me. I'm not a very technologically advanced person, admittedly so. It's kind of a weakness of mine. So I'm working on getting to a point where I'm a little bit more fluent in that, and then we're talking about doing stuff like that soon, because I think that's a good way to stay relevant in a time where you can't play live.
Yeah, maybe
so content. Yeah, I'm actually working on one of those as we speak.
Yeah.
But it's just something I've never done before. From the actual, you know, video editing and all that, I don't know how to do that, so I have to kind of slowly figure it out, or find people that can help me.
You'll find some tech-savvy people out there, especially at this time.
Oh, they exist for sure, but I'm not one of them.
To each his own. I'm not one of them either. It's probably going to take me 2.5 hours just to import the audio of this interview on my computer. But Andy,
yeah, I feel you.
But Andy, thank you so much for your time. Everybody, we are here with Andy of Black Crown Initiate, Violent Portraits of Doomed Escape, coming out via Century Media August 7th. Be sure to pick it up then. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.